morning, Richard Miller and Never Not Here, and we're doing a worldwide hookup, talking to New York. Still in Australia, and so then we cross the globe. What do we talk about? We really talk about what seems to make up our life and what seems to make up the lives of those around us. And so much of it is our interpretation or our description. It comes through our description. In other words, let's say what happens around us comes through our description. And what happens to us comes also through our description. And I guess there's times when we don't make a description, when we're asleep, or if we were sick or knocked out or in a coma, or, certain people wouldn't have a description. And maybe they don't experience very much at that time. I don't know, but this description is verbal, and what's verbal is really the story we tell ourselves. So we're all storytellers in a way, right? And what is the actual antidote to when our story is kind of like a melody? What would be the antidote? And very possibly it's another story, or it's a story that is a healing story or a soothing story. At least that's how we interact as citizens or beings in the race of humanity. We interact with either irritating scenarios or soothing scenarios, and we all want the world to have a more soothing and a more creative look to it. And so then let's look in, for some months and weeks I've really been trying to look at the stories that pervade my life, and I've called it self-talk, what I tell myself and what my worldview is and what my frame of reference is and what my mindset is, and what is this filter that somehow my belief structure that I lay on every experience. And so today we're talking to an expert in turning the word, and we're talking to a storyteller. And welcome, Laura Sims.
So much of my work has to do with listening to people's stories and discerning between the overlay of assumption that people put onto the story and listening for what might be the authentic expression of story that could be the healing narrative in their lives if they related to what was actually happening and what they were doing and how they saw things, as opposed to what you call the projections or the overlay, which is how we get caught in sort of an endless loop of self-storytelling that can only lead to misery. And if you change that story without actually discovering what your genuine nature is, or your genuine story, that doesn't really matter. You'll eventually just have another story that sets you up in the same cyclone of thinking. So I don't know if this is clear. So my interest is in how I can tell stories or listen to stories in ways that clear out some of the assumptions that block us from living with presence and joy and finding a more authentic place inside ourselves to tell a story with less projections. And very often that's a revelation, even though someone has actually given me the clues. It's a revelation that that is the story that we're living and telling and convincing ourselves of and trying to change and presenting to others. Is this making any sense?
Well, there's many ways to look at storytelling, and the way you're describing sounds very alive. In other words, storytelling in a way is a thespian art. You're an actress. You're able to get up and entrance people with a mystery of a way of looking at something that they've never looked at before, even if it's a fairy tale or a fable. Or
well, actually, I am very interested in the alive quality. and I'm not an actress. The base, or the sort of fundamental ground of my performance, is just being present. I don't take on the character of a storyteller or have a particular story that I speak out of. So I'm not a thespian in that way. I'm more related to very, very early, I think, more ritual story or mythic story that connects you immediately in the present to a sense of a bigger story than the one that I'm constructing. So I'm not an actress. I'm a good presence on stage, and I think it's uncanny in storytelling because I make a very, very direct relationship to my audience. And it is the imagined story that my audience is manifesting moment by moment, each person quite uniquely, that makes up this ephemeral, theatrical, momentary event that seems to be about the content of the story, but keeps pointing inward and outward at the same time. So it is a mystery, but it's not a logical system. It is a reciprocal event. It's a moment-by-moment event. I never memorize. I'm not interested in the content, the analysis of the content alone. I'm interested in the dynamic of people waking up. I'm not devoted to creating conceptual ideas.
Well, I realized immediately that you had all the skills of an actress, of a great presence, right? A great stage presence and a great incantation, right? I realize you have all those skills, and it's the skills of presence and the skills of aliveness. And then you just referred to it's the weaving of the story is something that goes outward and inward at the same time, and often our stories are so outward. You know, that they did this to us, that we're under the thumb of these people, that this aggression is continuing in the world, that there's the haves and the have-nots, and you know, and it's so exterior, and so then you're saying that somehow the way you weave the story, that people get an insight to something that's interior too, some way that they're receiving that exterior. Their reception mode is the interior part, and something, there's power in that, right? Whereas if you're totally on the external part, there's not much power in it.
Anyway, that's true. Maybe I should tell you a story, and then we could talk about the story.
That'd be wonderful. I love it.
Well, this is a story that I love, and I read it actually in a translation by a wonderful Welsh storyteller named Daniel Morden in a book of Haitian tales that he put together in the 1980s. And I called him about the story, and he had heard it, he said, from a Haitian girl. So I phoned up a Haitian storyteller I know named Mimi Bartholomew, who lives in Paris, and she knew the story. And then I was in a camp. I've been working in Haiti for the last 2 years, and actually this evening I've been dramatically very involved with people that I know in Haiti because they're waiting for the possibility of a huge and very devastating hurricane to hit. So I will tell this story almost like a prayer, like an incantation, and hope that it can bring joy and release to us all. But I will tell you that I changed something about this story. So I'm going to tell you the story, and then I'll tell you the part that I changed and why, and then we can talk about this story, because I'm getting lost in theories about story and narrative, and I need, this is my ground, my home ground. But there was a man, you're following so far, and he made a beautiful bowl. And he placed the bowl on the water so that people could drink fresh, clean water. Very dramatic in Haiti. And many people came and they drank the water, and people were happy to have this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful bowl. But one day a woman came to the same lake, and nobody was there. She was coming from the market, and she saw the beautiful bowl. She thought, that's a beautiful bowl. It would look so nice in my house. And I could really relate to that. So since nobody was there, she went into the water, took the bowl, walked out, and she put it in the basket that she had. She put a sack of salt that she had bought in the market, and she started walking. She was walking. All of a sudden, the basket started speaking, and the basket said, "It's not your bowl. It's not your bowl." So woof, she took the basket and she threw it away, and then she started walking really fast. When the salt started speaking, "It's not your bowl. It's not your bowl." So she tossed away the salt, and then she was running, and she was really thirsty, stopped by a stream to drink, hugging the bowl. But the stream water said, so she stood up, and then she really started running. She was running really fast, but her clothing started talking. "It's not your bowl." And she just took off her clothes and really ran, and ran right into someone she knew. And their skin started talking. And their skin said, "It's not your bowl. It's not your bowl." She was humiliated. She didn't want to be seen. And she ran past her clothing, past the stream, past the salt, past the basket, and she jumped into the water. And the water took back the bowl, the beautiful bowl, so everyone could drink. But the water took the woman and started pulling the woman, pulling her down, pulling her down, pulling her down, until she said, "It's not my bowl." And the water let her go. And she went, took her basket, took her salt, put back her clothes, went to her friend, went back to the village. But on the water, the beautiful bowl, the most beautiful bowl, was there for everyone to drink. So what do you think of
The story of deep consciousness, right? There's some kind of a consciousness that's that a little man on our shoulder is telling us a story, right? And something about our life that we're not getting, right?
Well, tell me what it reminds you of in your...
We know something that we're not getting.
Well, tell me what it reminds you of in your own life. Let's get personal, because a story is at once very universal, very deeply personal. And then I'll tell you what I changed in the story. Does it remind you of anything?
Well, I don't know if it reminds me that I downloaded somebody's movie or something like that, and it's not my movie, or I don't think it reminds me of that. But I have something that belongs to the common, right? You know, what do I have that belongs to everybody? I have respect that belongs to everybody, and maybe I've taken that respect away and said it only belongs to where I want to put it. And so then I control my respect, you know, and really everybody deserves the respect is something that is not really divisible. It can't be limited, right? There's no limit to it. And I don't know, that's what hits me first.
Well, you know, I love to tell this story, and I tell it to a lot of different people. I told it to women in camp in Haiti where I'm working. I told it to sort of cutting-edge young environmentalists. I've told it to aid workers and students of mine. friends, and everyone relates to different parts of it and relates to it differently, which is part of the beauty of a story. But also, everyone relates to the fact that she throws away the basket. She throws away what talks, but she doesn't really let go of the bowl, which is kind of that grasping onto fixation or ideas or whatever you want, holding on to that and not releasing our hold on our opinion or our desire or what we want. So I think it's very beautiful. And also, I'm also struck by how poignant this story is, because maybe she wasn't even doing something criminal. It's just being attracted to something and taking it and not thinking of consequences. And I also, in the Haitian story that I heard several times, she drowns at the end. She jumps into the water takes the bowl, and she sinks to the bottom of the water. And when I was telling it in the camp, I felt that, well, people had enough loss. And I loved that, I just sort of did it one day, that she realized, she just said, well, it's not my bowl. Because it is when we just simply recognize something that we let go, that we are released. And I also love everything that's talking. I love everything being alive, that everything is a message, and that it makes us imagine and feel. I always see the water and the bowl, and my imagination is alive in the story. And I really like her, and I relate to the fact of how often I also am embarrassed when I do something that I'm trying to hide and somebody sees it.
Nice. Okay, well then it's a story of authenticity, because everything that's not authentic with us is what we're trying to hide. And so then somehow, if you look at it that she went in the lake and she drowned, then it's about guilt and punishment, and all those people scolding her, like her clothes and her basket and stuff scolded her, and she finally got guilty, and then it's kind of like justice story.
Yeah, it is who tells the story and how it's being told, because someone could tell it like that, and someone could add a little neat little line at the end, therefore you should never take anything that's not yours, or punishment is good. I like to tell a story that's more open, where you could feel love for her as well as suspicion and recognize your own human foible. I'm not a great proponent, as I know you're not, of punishment and reward. So, but I wanted to put a story out, because this story is bigger than itself and bigger than all our explanations and analysis. Did you see any pictures in your mind while listening?
Well, I saw the bowl was kind of had blue decorations in it. It was white with blue.
That's beautiful.
I kind of thought it was like in the lake. The lake might have been dirty, or had and by surrounding a certain amount of water where it was kind of like a settling bowl too, where like the water could cleanse in that bowl as the sediment settled out, and then it could be refreshed too with a little bit more turbid water, and then that would settle out for the next passerby, right?
So that's like your own little story.
Yeah, I got all kinds of imaginations about it.
You do. But of course, what's beautiful is that if we could tune into everybody listening, every person would see the bowl differently, and they might have a little different story than yours, your elaborate story of the sediment and cleansing.
And another part of the bowl, another part of it was that everyone left it there and used it, and it kind of got to be like a community thing, that it was always there, and nobody ever thought, hey, I should take that into my kitchen. And then that was a whole kind of a different, so then she was had a little bit different cultural take, maybe they were a tight community, or many generations of a tight community, and this girl was a gypsy, and she was more used to picking up things that would serve her, right?
I mean, this is the beauty of a story, and I like the essence or the core of a tale, and then it's going to have all of this kind of response, and that's the beauty of it, having conversations in which everybody adds their ideas and imaginings and their theories, and there's room enough for all those theories, then rather than having one single story and one right conclusion, which would be extremely dangerous.
Right. So the conclusion is open. Well, do you have a chance when you're presenting this?
No conclusion.
No conclusion, right?
No,
It's
no
just
conclusion.
whatever you want to put to it.
Maybe. What were you going to ask? What were you going to ask me? You were going to ask me, do I...
No, yeah.
You
Now
s-
my question was like, do you have it? Because you asked me what. Let's just make it personal. You know, what does that remind? And you get a chance, like when you're on stage or wherever you are, in a circle or something where you're telling a story. Is there in a smaller setting, of course? I guess there's a chance to have every feedback and have people say, well, what did that mean for me? But on a stage, maybe you can just have people contemplate, and maybe there's no room for them to share it. But or maybe they can shout out a couple of things and say, "Oh, here's one. Oh, there's one." How interactive?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, you know, every situation is different. If it's a very, very large venue and I'm telling stories, then I might not ask for visceral and vocal participation, but I'll know that everyone is imagining their own story. Nobody is seeing or hearing the exact story that I'm seeing and hearing, which is my sanity. But the story does have a path. It has a path of something that's happening. But in smaller venues, more and more, I do try to have conversations, not so much about what it means to somebody, but if it reminds people of something in their own lives, another experience.
What it
Because
elicits. What it
yeah,
elicits.
I'm not so interested in making meaning, but in associations and reflections to open up the idea that a story is a kind of scaffolding on which we often can reflect our lives. We can have insight, deep insight, like you said before, or sometimes we can see our life in a bigger picture. I mean, that's just one story, the bowl, beautiful bowl.
What comes to me to say is like, what is the bowl? You know, what is that spaciousness that each one of us is grasping, completely grasping, right? At all costs, and that's the bowl of the story of me. You know, that space is where we fit in our past. You know, and how we keep going back and ruminating on our past and trying to follow all the different threads and see if there's where the treasure is lying. Right, and maybe there is treasure in our memories, but really the most treasure is going to be right here and now with the you that's in front of us. And so continually we're hugging our bowl and trying to fill it with all our memories, even if they're painful, right? We're trying to fill them with all
I mean, sometimes people are filling it not even with memories, but with fixed stories or theories or opinions, or seeing something from a very small point of view that limits their own experience of themselves in the world. So you could fill that bowl with anything, or you could construct that bowl out of anything. But there is simply a bowl, and there is water, and you can't grasp onto space. But the stories we usually try to grasp onto are very often to avoid at all costs the experience of space or the unknown, which is kind of the underlying of all stories, or ultimately what we experience during a storytelling might be that, which is why it feels so refreshing or enchanting. Do you follow what I'm saying about that? There's a quality of the story holds us, and we visualize, but it's such a very multi-leveled way that very often we settle down, and the spaciousness that we often ignore, we can actually feel, almost as if it's comes through the cracks in our own story, because we're listening moment by moment in a particular way. We're not fixing, but we're listening. and that listening is alive. So we do feel a kind of relaxation, and a lot of that relaxation is what I'm after sometimes in places like Haiti, or working after disasters, or working with stressful situations, or even in schools, the settling of the mind. Because if you are more present, you're less likely to hurt yourself or others, or to get lost in a loop of fantasy and self-hatred or lack of self-confidence. Kind of a sneaky way of letting people experience their own joy, which is inherent.
So it seems like you're saying that we tell our stories over and over again, our stories of pain or stress or our narrow focus stories, and we tell them without even listening to them, right? And then
very
somehow you
often,
come on a
that's
picture
true.
and you incite a new listening by telling a story that is very interesting, but we have to catch all the details, so we really have to pay attention, right? Because we're so interested in it because of the well, the power you've put into it. And there's a lot of turns, and we have to listen to. So then all of a sudden we're lit, as far as like maybe our mind is quieted because we don't know what to make. This is such a different story that it's it kind of breaks all our patterns, right? And then now we're just pure listening, and in that frame of reference, we have a chance to listen to our own story and see the ridiculous part of it, or the narrowness of it, or the limitation.
Or sometimes, I like what you're saying, and sometimes it is that we actually relax enough to be in our story rather than to be conjuring up another personal thought festival. But we could actually relax and be in our lives, or directly communicate to somebody, not through a wall of concepts, but actually very directly. It's the trembling and living quality of communication that could happen. And can you imagine, I mean, our young people who are so allured by constant digital engagement, which is even this medium that we're on now, can't have the kind of living quality that presence has. But they're actually could come back to that mind-body connection in a way where they can feel really delighted by communicating to someone else, and deep listening.
It's so fascinating about your profession and your activities that you are actually face to face with groups, and you were talking about the digital media and so on, and we even sometimes frequent some large spiritual forums, and but there's no face-to-face contact. It's all distilled in words, and the words can get lost in the story, and the purpose of the words can be my rightness and your wrongness, right? Or like, I know more than you, or like, my views are better than your views, and if you'd adopt them, you'd have a beautiful life like mine, which may be pretty stressed the moment they get off the forum. But anyhow, somehow that arm's length, where you don't really have the eye face-to-face contact, the heart-to-heart contact, concepts, we're speaking in concepts now, but somehow we're also speaking connectedly, and that's in this day and age, I mean, you travel around, you go all over the world, and you got to get in a suitcase in a hotel, and you got to move, and that's getting kind of rare, isn't it?
Is it? Huh. Well, for instance, it is slightly confusing for me, this connection that we're having. I can try my best, but I can't really, there's whole elements of our communication that I can't feel, because you're not present with me, even though I can see you and hear you it's still mediated by a screen and by a change of time and a way that I'm seeing, which is different. I can't feel something that I feel in person. And that's really interesting. So I wonder, I was wondering what would happen if we were sitting in the same room? Would we have the same conversation? I'm not sure.
Probably not. I mean, doubtlessly it would be different, but somehow, and it would, go on a little longer, like I'd have to set my cameras up and then I'd take them down, and then who knows, we might be at a retreat or something together where we'd see each other tomorrow. And definitely coming somewhere is different. But I mean, this is actually a good in-between ground, I think, because I mean, I feel that I can feel you, and I can feel the power in your story too.
Thank you.
And if I just read it would be different if I was just reading your book.
But I was going to talk about that because some people have said, why, if I'm an oral storyteller, which I am, why did I write a book? I've written several, but this new one, which is called Our Secret Territory, The Essence of Storytelling. And I wrote it because I thought, if I could, as you used the word describe, but evoke is more what I was thinking, like evoke and present the context and some of the effect of when I tell stories, that maybe people could have a deeper understanding of the nature of storytelling, not just think of it as little, fantasy stories or content only, but understand something about the penetrating effect of communications and what happens when you listen to stories. So I tried writing that book. It took me quite a long time, and I really enjoyed it. I loved the form of essays where I weave stories in and out of a discussion of events which are about telling stories and effects of stories and how we live in stories. We are stories. So I really had a good time writing it, even though it was very hard to write it. I loved it, and I'm having a good response from it, from people. And I'm pleased, interestingly enough, that I have a document that is trying to bring language alive on the page, almost like poetry or music, but in written word. And Connie Shaw, who was the editor, was great because she allowed the book to have a beauty and a shape to it that really mirrored what I was doing, so that when you open the pages, you actually feel very delighted by the way that the words are set out and the spacing and so forth. So,
have you tried to make an audiobook out of it also, or would it be much different as an audio? I mean, if you read it to us and then that was available online as an audio.
I would love to do that.
And then from that, you could experiment that some books could actually be audio books that wouldn't even, that would be more difficult to translate into written works. Because you would see
I've always loved books.
The power of audio.
Yeah, but I love books. I love words, and I love type, and I love the magic of language. I've always loved holding a book, the privacy of holding a book, which is a very different experience than listening to a story. So I think that was part of my delight. But you're in Australia. You're in the world of Aboriginal stories and corroboree and songs and praise of and connection to ancestors. Do you feel that at all? Have you experienced that?
I spent some time with some Aborigines, but not so long, just a week. It was a good time because it wasn't just I went to one village. I went to a place where Aborigines from different parts of the world, different parts of Australia gathered. It was a gathering, and so then I actually did get a chance. I think I came out with I produced like 17 interviews or talks, and actually I've got 3, 4, or 5, I don't know, a bunch more too that I never did produce. I just moved on to the kind of like the next phase. And I actually have thought that I wanted to try to get a longer visa here and call myself a journalist and try to go around and meet Aboriginal communities and talk to them. And I was in New Zealand for a few months, and I did talk to Maori, and then I talked to someone else that studied Maoris and studied also civilizations that came before the Maori. And he was really eye-opening.
What did he have to say about stories and images?
Well, the whole history of these peoples is a story. It's actually a song, and he was somehow delivered 3,000 songs, and which he published in many volumes and in a great work, and their whole history is in these songs. And I don't know. I mean, I didn't really read them. He didn't give me one of his books, but he was saying, okay, like when he asked for the song about the I don't know, let's say some of the original voyagers from Polynesia that came to New Zealand. And they said, well, do you want the short version or long version, And the short version was several hours or half a day. And the long version was like a week, They would sing this song for a week. So he was saying things like that. I don't know, or several days. It would be the long version would be days and days, and it's all like oral tradition history, and it tells even who every mariner was. There was 140 mariners on this one long canoe, and every name is sung, and the whole history is like a history book, right? I don't know. These are just
a mythic history book. I mean, people really feel connected then. It's even used in the courts in New Zealand, the whakapapa, your history all the way back to the very beginnings and even before beginnings. Very beautiful.
Right. And so then so many stories are kind of rooted in our belief about ourselves, which you could call like our worldview or even the axioms, if you want to give it a kind of like use mathematics as kind of a metaphor. The axioms are something that are accepted, that can't be proved or disproved. So then these ground myths.
What are you referring to?
Well, I'm referring to the ground myths, that how we see society or what our worldview is, right? And then people have studied myths, and I don't know if there's supposed to be 18 kinds or archetypes and so on, but in a way, when you tell a story, you're grounded in mythology, but you're also kind of taking a new view on some mythology, right? Or recreating new mythology. I think we need a new mythology because the old one is kind of keeps us at each other's throat, right?
Well, I think that mythologies, when they're sung, are different from someone fixing a mythology as the only story that there is. I'm not sure that myth isn't a way of keeping us part of the history of being, and that what you're talking about might not be a myth, but a story that proves one culture is better than another. And once I was working in the north of Romania, actually in Transylvania, at a theater festival, and there were 5 young people from, let's say, Romania, Bulgaria, Serbia, Yugoslavia, Albania. So I asked them to each tell their kind of epic story of their culture. And obviously, since you know how long they are, was the shortened version. But one would say, in 300 AD, we conquered Hungary, Albania, Romania, and my hero was this one, and he will rise up again. And then the next young person said, well, in 500 AD, we conquered Serbia, and this, and each story was very similar in a way, but afterwards we all laughed, because how could you say that any story was a true story? It serves within a culture, but if it serves to make war and to frustrate that culture into a single belief, then maybe it's not mythic. Maybe it doesn't liberate us. So we liberated ourselves. I'm not sure we need new myths as much as maybe we need to learn more about the nature of reality and be present in our world, and then we'll have more access to some of the deeper life force inside these stories, rather than always seeing it from our minds, which have to interpret, but more being inside the story. But we would have to work on ourselves. I think that's more important than creating a new story. We might create a new content, but not have transformed the way that we view ourselves in the world, and ultimately we'd be creating the same problem. So the other
there's a great belief that a human needs guidance, right? And it needs a kind of a blueprint to try to conform his life to, or otherwise there's a great belief that presence is not enough, that we go wild, and that we're just actually
well, who told you that story? Who told you that story?
We keep making laws and and acting like.
Who told you that story?
Well, that's one I've tried to refute. I don't really like to believe it, but I mean, I think many people told me that story, right?
Maybe.
You must conform. I mean, that's your first story, right? I mean, when you're a child, language is an external thing that creates an image that you can be like this, or they always say you already are. You're a wonderful child. You're a brilliant child, and they say you're already like that, but it's an image they're saying you're already like that seems like it's outside. And then they say, hey, you could behave like this. You could clean your room, Hey, how about that? You could get along with your brother, How about that for a good image? And so everything comes from the outside and says you can be. There's another way you can be, And then maybe some of us are really good. We're good on the sports team and stuff, and we like those images because we're winner on those images. We're A students and all that stuff. And then others of us merely get by with it, and we kind of snake by and feel like, oh well, we can handle it. And others of us, in many times during our lives, we feel like failures, and then we rebel and say, no, I don't want to be. That's the last thing I want to do. I'm going to do the opposite. I can even remember when my dad used to try to, guide me to be a little bit more competitive or successful or something, and I kind of got it I realize now that I got it in my head that I would just show him a thing or two. I'd do the exact opposite. If he said I was slow, I was going to be really slow. And so some of us don't make very good on these external images, but really, if we're just a space and consciousness now, then how do we get a hint so we can create our own image and just let our life fall into that image?
Well, maybe I guess we don't create our own images. Maybe if we really were present, we'd have a different experience. And maybe what you're talking about, maybe it wouldn't be wild in the notion of being out of control, but it would be deeply connected. And of course, there's guidance, but what if you're guided by someone who's deeply connected, who introduces you to listening and experience, and offers you a more authentic sense of history and inquisitiveness? I think, I thought of a story while you were talking, and Cecil, we're talking about. It's a lovely, it's a story that actually was given to me on a piece of paper, and it came through a fax machine, and it came from an Israeli storyteller, Yoel Peretz, who was working with a lot of Arab storytellers. This was before the Intifada. And I had asked him he wanted to give me a gift, and I said, if you ever find a teeny tiny story that you really love, send it to me. And one day this story came, and it's a story told inside a story, told inside another story, told inside another story in a bigger story. But here's the little story. And there was a man who was very, very, very wealthy, and he was very, very, very intellectual. And he wanted to know the meaning of everything. He wanted to understand everything and find its meaning. So, since he was so wealthy, he hired a servant, really, to go and find wise people to come to his house. He could interview them, could record what they said, and finally understand everything. And one wise person was brought after another to his house, and he would interview them. He had so many, many, many different ideas and theories, but he didn't feel he understood anything. So finally, one day his servant came and said, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but there are no wise people left. And he said, this is impossible. There has to be someone who's left. I don't know everything. And the servant said, well, there's a child. He said, a child? What can a child know? And the man said, well, I've heard about this child. He said, all right, I have a lot of money. Bring the child. I'll ask him questions. If he doesn't answer, you can keep the money and we could send him away. A few days later, little boy arrived. And the man asked a very, very complicated, sophisticated, roundabout question. And the little boy had a very short, very fresh little answer. The man was startled. He asked him another question. And the boy's answer was so unusual, so illuminating, he asked him another question. And he thought, I'm so happy it's a child, because I could keep him here for a long time. But the little boy got bored. And the little boy said, can we play? And the man said, play? What do you want to play? And the boy said, you hide, I'll find you. And the man said, no, I know so many things. I know about 3 worlds and this. You hide. The little boy said, nope, you hide. And the man said, okay. Clapped his hands, and the man disappeared into another world. The little boy looked everywhere. He looked and he said, come back, you're not supposed to hide in the other world. And back came the man. And the man said to the child, no, you hide. The little boy said, okay. Clapped his hands, jumped into the man's heart. Man looked everywhere. He looked in all 3 worlds. He looked throughout the universe. He looked underwater, behind buildings, clouds, inside of mountains. And finally he said, where are you? And the boy said, I'm very close. I don't see you. I'm very near. Where are you? Little boy said, here, right here. The man said, come out. I said, okay. Out came the child. The man said, where were you? He said, I was hiding in your heart. If you don't look there first, you'll never know anything.
That's an Israeli story, huh?
No. It was sent by an Israeli storyteller. I think it's Turkish. I don't know. Turkish, Arabic, Israeli. Somebody told it. And now I'm telling it to you.
In a way, that's really clear, whether you say hard or not. I mean, something about life is always said to be really right here, present. Where else are you going to be? Everything you need to know is right here, or you yourself that you're seeking is right here. and somehow we're always stepping over it, walking over it. So there is this some place, this right here, this is the last place we'll ever look, right?
Well, maybe that's. I mean, for myself, that's what I needed guidance in. That's the guidance I chose when I chose a meditation teacher. In that guidance, then the journey can begin. Otherwise, we're just constantly taking mental journeys. This is what is the journey taken in our lives? But I wondered, what did it feel like when you listened to the story? Because I loved watching your face, but I'm not there.
Well, I
How
mean,
did it
taken by the
feel?
story because I didn't really realize where where how he was gonna hide, or what was gonna happen, or why, it all kind of adds up, when the old man is seeking wisdom in every corner of the world and from every oracle possible. And then the story kind of comes down to what you said after the story, actually, is that if you don't start with your heart, then what wisdom do you really have? And then I guess that's a spiritual teaching, because a lot of stuff that we look into, they're saying, well, who am I? Who are you? What is this unit here that is perceiving, right? Perceiving, being, and acting. And until you know that, really, whatever you find out is somehow flawed. And so that gives you the impetus to look into your own heart. And so many people are saying, to drop some level of barriers or some level of fears, which means it's okay to be with another person, right? And yeah. So then to be with somebody else.
So that's what storytelling is about. It's about being with ourselves, being with another person, being with the natural world, being with the spiritual reality all at once. In that moment, that's what I hope that the story does for us. I'm not talking about the meaning of the content, but the whole process of engagement, of really being engaged, hopefully brings us to have that experience during the story, and then maybe in our lives we look for it more, or we have some contrast, or we feel even refreshed, like a window was blown open and suddenly fresh air came in. And then the images, I mean, lots of people come back after hearing stories and say, oh, I love that story, it made me think about such and such, or can you tell that story? I brought my friend to hear it, or so forth. And there's something very alive about that and very wonderful.
It's so great that it's so obvious that you've found something that really, really interesting, and you can be passionate about, right? And it can be like a reason for so many facets of your life. Can just be about spreading stories, and about maybe you're even kind of hooked as far as like having that connection that goes through the story, right? And you put yourself in the situations where these can, even right now, you and I are connected, and those people that are watching with us have a connection. And then maybe what we're saying is like, hey, all you guys can do this too, not necessarily through the story, but why not through the story too, and through a kinder and broader story. I'm not trying to impress a narrower story of pressure and pain.
No, I love that idea of a kinder and broader story. I mean, I don't mean to avoid or smooth over what's difficult in the world, but a broad story would include it all. And also, a kind story would have some realization of the effect that a story has on others, and would be caring in that way. Not necessarily polite, but caring. And that, I think, goes a long way in our world.
I think every story should be told with the the cognizance of what the effect of that story is, right? And it's either a closing effect, or it's an effect. Maybe you're trying to get someone to feel guilty, or to to pay reparations or something like that. But really, every story that we tell ourselves, even every story that I tell myself, I try to say, well, what's the effect of that, and is that where I want to go now at this age? You know, at one time I thought, oh yeah, I can tramp through any desert, right, and I can go through any jungle and any swamp, and the swamps of my ideas and the swamps of my stinky emotions, right? And now I kind of think that like the woman with the bowl, and I was saying that for me that bowl was kind of a bowl of where I'm going to put my attention, and I want to fill it up with the stories of me, which come out of my memory, right? How I was abused, or how I was missed my opportunities, or how I, you know, whatever had happened wrong. It doesn't seem like I can remember all the ones that happened right? How I fell in love one time, and maybe she'll come back. I don't know, in another form. But so then telling a story and knowing the effect of it, and okay, the most stories we tell are just about how we hold ourselves. And if the effect of that is closing or liberating. And, you know, when it's liberating, it's in a way shocking and scary, because liberating really means cut loose, and we don't know what that'll look like because we haven't been there before. And, you know, we might not be one that wants too adventurous of a spirit. We say, no, let me just go one step at a time, right? Or I never step off this rock, you know, until I make sure I get on another good, strong rock, you know, and somehow it's too far away to get there while I still got my old foot in that old mentality.
Well, that'd be a very funny little story about somebody crossing on rock to rock, for instance. That's a great image. It could be a beautiful little story. You have to be careful not to get in the rock and get caught in the rock and get stuck in there. Like in story in the fairy tale where a giant turns the two brothers who are too hasty and selfish, turns them to stone.
So maybe tell us your website and stuff where we can track your movements, and maybe sometime you and I can cross paths, and certainly people that are listening can cross paths with you.
Yeah. Well, my website is just my name, www.laurasims.com. And I do have a blog, and what I've been doing on my blog is I've been telling a fairy tale and just talking about reflections on that fairy tale for the archaeology of the story. My blog is called The Illuminated Story Touched by the World. And,
touched by the world. By the world,
to be touched. I'm touched by the world. And then I'm going to start really posting some notices on my blog about where I'm writing about the work I'm doing in Haiti, and I'm running a summer camp in Haiti and for children, arts camp for children, and a writing group for girls in the small camp in Port-au-Prince where I've been working the last few years as a way of helping these kids who've lived in tents for over 2 years since the earthquake. And so,
is there a way we could support you through your website or your blog?
Well, I was on causes.com, and on my website you can read about how you can support the project through causes.com, and I hope to actually move to another crowdfunding site that is much more focused and I think more tremendous. But if you look at my website, you can keep up with that. But it is very easy to fund it. I have an extra month now to fund because the schools will open late because of financial problems in Haiti. So I want to keep the children's program going. It's a great program. The kids have lots of games which really work on their physical working with each other and focusing. They have a story, and then they have an arts project, a good snack, which kids really want and love. And then it ends with more games in which they are feeling a lot more self-confidence and getting a lot of wonderful skills. So we want to continue that through September And then the girls group, great. The girls want to write a book. I brought them one camera. I want to get them 2 more. And they want to write a book of stories about their lives in the camp, what it's been like for them to lose their homes and to live, both the positive and negative. And so I'm trying to raise money so that they can write this book. And that means I have a writer who's going to work with them. I go to work with them. They keep notebooks. They'll learn how to use computers, and we're taking pictures. So they're great. There are 15 girls, ages 11 to 18, and they've lived in a very, very difficult situation. And this coming together and working is giving them a lot of strength and a lot of support in a situation where they're extremely vulnerable, as you can imagine. So it'll be great.
Wow, we really thank you for sharing your passion, sharing your life, and sharing the lives of these girls and their vulnerability, which out of vulnerability seems to come truth. And so if we can, and authenticity, right? And that could be a model for our own lives of how we can be more authentic and more close to our own core.
I'm not sure that their vulnerability only brings that to them. It's not an easy life for them. It's a vulnerability to danger, but hopefully the writing will keep them open and vulnerable, as you're talking about, so that within the difficulty of lack of hygiene and privacy with sexual harassment and poverty, which is the way people live in the tent, that they'll get more inner strength and they'll be able to reconstruct their lives.
I hope we can follow your voyage periodically and
thank you.
Bring us
that would be great.
Yeah.
Yeah, donations, small and large. Some people have given $10. Some people have given $500 or $1,000, and every single penny goes toward making this project work for the kids and the girls.
Thank you much for your time and your visit, Laura Sims.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Good night. I mean, good day to you. Good night to me.
Good day to us.
Okay. Bye.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and watching. And I'm sure we'll have more reports from both Haiti and from Laura Sims and from other projects that she's involved with. So, good night.